I'm talking cryptids, I'm talking UFOs, we're talking ghosts, we're talking cursed land, satanic rituals. Probably everything that you could imagine would go on in a creepy piece of land. Happy Wednesday, or whatever day you're listening to this on. I recognize that there are other days of the week. You have unlocked another Closer Look episode. Woo! This time it's with me, Lindsay. And if you don't recognize my voice, that's okay. We're three ladies with three voices that are sometimes hard to tell apart. So usually I'm the one who's talking about Broadway musicals and saying, I'm self-conscious now. Well, hi. I hope you're not too sad missing Jesse and Sammy. Just know if you're mourning them, I am with you right there. This is not the same for me without my buddies. I can talk in a void, and I have enjoyed it. My last Closer Look episode, we talked about mermaids, and I think I convinced you. So I'm hoping I can do the same again. But if not, rest assured we'll be back next week with some very interesting topics. And please, please consider subscribing so you don't miss an episode. And consider giving us 5 stars if this episode piques your interest. And consider leaving a crazy comment if it doesn't, because that's still engagement. Where to begin? I guess usually we share a little bit about our day or our week. Because there's so much cool stuff in this episode, I'll share with you a sentence. I just helped a very scared raccoon escape a dog. Yeah. And I'm not going to tell you anything else. And this isn't going to be an episode on how to make friends with the raccoons like Jessie made her episode on how to make friends with the crows, but I do think I'm a friend to the raccoons now. So, yeah. I'll leave you with that, and you can fill in the blanks with your imagination. Okay, anyway. This is a closer look on the Bridgewater Triangle, which was an episode that Sammy did. And then in my attempt to drum up publicity for it, I made a TikTok that went a bit insane in terms of the amount of people who resonated with it, the amount of people who had stories about the Bridgewater Triangle. And we were like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with all of this extra information? We just did an entire episode on the Bridgewater Triangle. Where do we go from here? Well, this is where we go. We go to the void, and I have specially curated these firsthand accounts, these crazy stories, and these extra tidbits that we did not cover during our original episode. So if you're feeling like you want the backstory, I would pause this episode, ideally when I'm making a really funny face. Keep me frozen on your YouTube, go listen to our Bridgewater episode, and then come straight back for the tea. Great, you're back. And if you did not do that, thanks for staying to hang with me. The Bridgewater Triangle, where to begin? Well, if you did not do the review, the Bridgewater Triangle is about a 200 square mile area in southeastern Massachusetts. Its boundaries are defined by Abington, Freetown, and Rehoboth, though there has been some dispute online. That is what the experts, quote unquote, say, but I am open to anywhere within another 10 miles of those, because does lore really adhere to man-made borders? I doubt it. Just like Bigfoot appears outside of California, please don't tell Jessie I'm talking about Bigfoot or believe in Bigfoot. It's like a really important thing that I keep gaslighting her, and I hope you're in on it. And if you're not in on it, that's what I do throughout the show. Okay, anyway, it's a 200 square mile area in southeastern Massachusetts that has crazy lore going on. I'm talking cryptids, I'm talking UFOs, we're talking ghosts, we're talking cursed land, satanic rituals. Probably everything that you could imagine would go on in a creepy piece of land. Bridgewater has it. Unlike the Bermuda Triangle, its enemy, its rival, which we have not done an episode on, but as far as I'm concerned, it's a lot of sinking ships and planes, which is, look, it's not good. But I argue this might be creepier, better. I don't know. How do we say that in lore terms? The response we got to the Bridgewater episode was absolutely phenomenal. It was crazy how many people had their own personal stories and wanted to reach out and tell us about them. We even got the middle-aged man demographic when a friend's dad, who was listening to the episode with her, told her to tell us that he actually grew up in the Bridgewater area and had 2 friends in his youth die in very mysterious and tragic circumstances. So this episode reached far and wide, and my favorite thing about this podcast is that people have stories. People have stories for days. I can't believe how many people, I've said this on the show, I can't believe how many people have come out of the woodwork to say that they have these stories that they wouldn't otherwise tell to people or they wouldn't otherwise know where to put. I'm really grateful to be able to get to do this. My favorite part of lore is getting the human aspect and getting these stories that wouldn't otherwise be told. It makes me so happy that we are a place where people feel comfortable writing in supernatural experiences, writing in their theories about history and science and storytelling, writing in their microcultures or their cultural traditions. Yeah, it's such a joy. So here's what we're gonna do. I curated all of these amazing messages and comments so that we could get some of the crazy nitty-gritty of what we didn't cover in the episode. And I could really give you the firsthand experiences that people have. I've saved some of our creepiest stories for the end of the closer look. It won't be a long episode either way. And I'll tell you some of our specific sightings and extra haunted places early in the episode. And caveat, if you are watching this video and you have your own account, which I know you do, you better write into Ladies Who Lore or just leave us a comment below. There's always room for more. We can do another closer look. It's crazy. So the things that came up again and again and again in the Bridgewater Triangle, we had shadow figures for days. We had orbs, which reminded me a lot of our Appalachian episodes about the Brown Mountain Lights. We had countless instances of people saying, you know, I don't know if this place is haunted, but surely every time I drive through the forest, my GPS and technology get totally messed up. We also had multiple accounts of our favorite kind of ghost, the women in white. On Ladies Who Lore, we believe there is a woman in white in like every location. And there is. It seems to be the most common form of spirit or ghost, whatever you want to call it. Now into the nittier grittier. UFOs. You guys saw UFOs. Most of the alien accounts in the Bridgewater Triangle occurred in the 60s and 70s. There is a very famous encounter that occurred in about 1979 where 2 men on their way to the Raynham dog track had a very close encounter with a UFO. And they described this UFO as a light that was just getting brighter and brighter and moving toward them. And then eventually it lifted up and they saw this flat, crazy spaceship that kind of looked like a baseball home plate or a pentagon for those of us who are not baseball fans. Are they Red Sox fans? They would be Red Sox fans around there, right? Yeah. Anyway, Call Me Cass wrote into us to tell us her own story. She said, "My mom's friend of the family lived here for generations. I remember before my Nana passed, she casually brought up a time that she saw a UFO while putting the laundry out to dry in the middle of the day. And the way she said it was so matter of fact, she knew exactly what she saw." Take it or leave it, folks, but Nanas know best. There's nothing I love more than an old woman with a story. Seems like a bunch of you have seen puckwudgies or aliens in the woods. Some people considered the cryptids to be aliens and offshoots of these UFO stories. Some people considered them puckwudgies. Capybara7 said, "My mom was driving one night in the dark. Her boyfriend was in the car with her, and they saw something hunched in the middle of the road with its back turned toward the car, furry, big, dog-sized. Both of them said it disappeared when they came up and she turned the high beams on. They both say it was a puckwudgie." I've never seen one of these things, but I hope not to, based on some of these encounters. For instance, Chelsea Draka, I'm probably not saying that right, said, "On an old center street between Bridgewater and Middleborough, I saw a creature running on the telephone lines that stopped and made eye contact with me, that erased the face I saw and gave me such an overwhelming dread feeling I puked on myself, and for months felt it telepathically attached to me and almost called me into the woods once. I could go on and on. And she didn't. And that's why I slept that night. I saw this picture on Reddit. This total tangent, guys. But I saw this picture on Reddit of someone who thought they had photographed an alien in the woods on their dad's hunting camera. Holy crap. Maybe everyone's photoshopping things, and in the age of AI, everything's a deep fake, and I'm just going to end up totally confused by that. But if that picture was real, terrifying, and probably a puckwudgie knowing what I know about the lore of the area. But maybe there are also aliens. But why not both? I wonder, do the puckwudgies and the aliens get along? Probably. A couple other places that people were excited for us to check out. Paranormal Pirate brought up Anawan Rock, which Sammy actually did talk about in the podcast episode. It carries a lot of lore and memory around the native Pocasset people, and a lot of people have seen apparitions of the clashes, of the battles, and of the people involved near that rock. I believe there's a very famous ghost of a chief who was meditating or sitting cross-legged. I don't know if this is the rock where people see him the most, but it certainly has ties to the old conflict of the settlers and the indigenous groups. Mental hospitals. There are 2 different mental hospitals, abandoned mental hospitals, which are in the area and people seem to explore. I really don't know why you guys do this. I hope that if you do this, you stay very safe, but I don't think you could pay me enough. Actually, that's not true. I'm thinking of me, Jesse, and Sammy right now. And when Jesse and Sammy hear this, maybe they can comment on it. I think I am the most likely of our threesome to go into an abandoned mental hospital. Not because I would of my own volition, but if I were in the group and we were like, someone's got to explore it, it would end up being me. I get waves of bravery every once in a while. And I also think that I can make friends with the spirits, which I know is naive. No need to tell me otherwise. What can I say? Okay, so anyway, Jesse and Jalen both wanted us to look more into the Taunton State Hospital. I did. It's widely considered to be one of the most haunted asylums in the US, and has been closed for a long time at this point. Ghost hunters who have been in report shadowy figures, screams coming from nowhere, obviously apparitions, and a famous spider-like entity. I hope that I never know what that looks like. But Aaron said, as teens, we used to dare each other to go to the front door of the Taunton State Hospital before it was demolished. Aaron, you are brave. Can I just say, when I was a teenager in Illinois, we didn't have any haunted locations to go dare each other to explore. And I'm kind of feeling like I missed out, because it does seem like all the cool movies have the groups of teenagers, exploring the haunted house or whatever. And yes, they're mostly horror movies and it doesn't end well for them. However, it does seem like a part of Americana. So if you are from Illinois and you did find haunted places to explore, will you let me know so I know what I missed out on? Okay, Delaney's also brave though, and Delaney went to the old Foxborough State Mental Hospital. Delaney says, don't live in the Triangle now, but I used to live at the old Foxborough State Mental Hospital, now turned apartments, and boy, do I have stories. What? Because I looked this up, it said it was closed in 1975 and remained abandoned for years, and this sounds like a horribly scary, terrifying place. Why would they make it into apartments? Katie also explored this place. God bless you, Katie. She said pre-2006, the abandoned part was way easier to get into because there was no fence yet. The grounds were super eerie, and some crazy kid I was with actually went inside. We used to call it the Borden Hospital because of the rumors that Lizzie Borden was there. I think she actually was only in the prison next door, though. At its peak in the 70s, there were 40 buildings, so it's pretty big. Okay, so I understand why they turned it into apartments, but is anyone living in those apartments now? And if you are, can you write into the pod? Because I'm positive you have stories. Okay. Then there's Fall River. This is where Lizzie Borden and the Lizzie Borden murders took place. One of our commenters also brought up that it has a really satanic history. I did look this up. In 1979, 3 young women were actually killed in a series of murders in Fall River. Allegedly, this was by a satanic cult practicing human sacrifice, which is just horrific. Also strange that it was the same year as the alien encounter. I won't draw conclusions. I hope those young women rest in peace. The final 2 locations that people brought up were, there's apparently a very famous pet cemetery, and I hope there are some sweet apparitions there, and a Mayflower cemetery from that area. And I didn't find more on that, but if you've visited either of those places and have stories, we can put it on our next Closer Look. Now the moment you have all been waiting for. I pulled our 3 eeriest longer stories, and I'm going to read them to you now. Thank you again for everyone who participated, and there's always room for more stories. So, from Sid. My grandparents' house used to be a soldier refuge. Just kidding. Her grandparents' house used to be a soldier refuge, you get it. My grandfather used to tell me stories of my dad having an imaginary friend, who my dad used to describe as being an army soldier. He was able to identify that by wearing a uniform, having a haircut, etc. The house was also old, early 1900s build. So you could hear every single footstep around the house. Multiple times when I was home alone, I would hear running and heavy footsteps from our 3rd floor. We did have cats, but they liked to sit with people and would never just free roam if someone was home. So it was not just pets. Doors in the house would close on their own. The stairs would creak without anyone walking on them. It was one of those old houses where you would get to the 3rd floor and the air would feel heavy and cold, like an energy shift. Along with that, adding on to my cats, one of them used to hiss at rooms when nobody was in them and used to always lurk around this room we had on the 3rd floor. She would never even follow me into that room, and she was a clingy cat. The other cat would also refuse to enter a different room on our 3rd floor as well. Like, his ears would go back randomly and he'd stare into the room and run away. My room and my grandmother's room were on the 3rd floor, so it would always creep me out when I would be chilling in bed with them at my feet, and then all of a sudden they would both jolt up, stare into the darkness, and run into the opposite direction. Saving themselves, I guess. Yeah, really creepy stuff. I have had some animals behave very strangely and stare into corners, bark at corners in the middle of the night, and it's really creepy. You do wonder if they see something or can sense something before you. So I believe Sid's house was haunted. Taylor says, I grew up here on wooded acres of private property. The woods were no joke at night. My dad and I are both incredibly sensitive to energies, entities, etc., and saw things regularly to a point where neither of us was spooked by them anymore. But I'll never forget when I was a teen, me and a couple friends were walking up the walkway to my house, and this white, fox-sized mist wove itself between all of our legs with every step. The air got thick, one of my friends panicked and shrieked, and the mist shot straight up into the sky and vanished right in front of us. It was weird. Kind of reminds me of the orbs. Kind of reminds me of this mist that people talk about. Shooting straight up in the sky is giving UFO. So you hit 3, Taylor. And then finally, VL Bland says, the shadow figures low-key just became normal. I go to school at Bridgewater State. Numerous times I woke up in the middle of the night to a shadow figure just standing over my bed. It walks to my desk and stands there like it's looking at shit for a minute and then just leaves through my door. Other times I've been sitting in my room and my blanket actually gets flipped up on my bed. Defies gravity. Explain that. I can't, I just believe you. And then I also live on the edge of the triangle, and I believe it's a lot of Native American magic based off what I've seen and experienced. Nothing that wishes to cause any harm, but I did wake up one night to my pillow being pulled out from under me and thrown across the room. About 19 years in this house, and that's the most aggressive thing I've ever experienced. I did see a Native American girl when I was 8, and I've had numerous people also sleep over and also see her as well. There's a lot of other weird phenomenons, but the shadow people and spiritual activity is definitely a real one here. Crazy and chills. There were a couple other people who wrote in saying that they had experienced a lot of spiritual strangeness, but that they weren't particularly afraid and that they believed that none of the energy would bother you if you didn't bother it. There was a woman who takes her dog walking in the woods and said that her dog often notices things and she often notices things, but she chalks it up to just being like really strange, heavy energy that you need to respect. And I think that's something that we oftentimes find in lore and in the supernatural, is that most of these things are worth respecting. And they're not necessarily things to panic about. They're just maybe things we don't fully understand. That being said, some of these, very, very creepy. So take my analysis with a grain of salt. Before we go, I just wanted to give a shout out to all the skeptics who also wrote in and said nothing is going on in Massachusetts and that this is all a bunch of hokum. It's valid. We can also look at all this through a very interesting anthropological and storytelling lens as well. We contain multitudes. But some people were really funny in their saying that they've lived in Bridgewater and in the area for years and have never experienced anything. But the horrors do really include potholes, Mara Healy, how cheap the gas is, which I don't really think is a horror, more like a draw. And then special shout out to our friend who said, nothing creepy goes on in the Bridgewater Triangle except for the ghost named Jacob in my house. That about sums it up. We live side by side with these things. I really hope you enjoyed today's closer look, and we will see you next week with a full-length episode. I had a blast chatting with you, and I'll be back soon. Oh no, though. I guess because we're done with the episode, I have to sing the song. How am I going to sing it, folks? If I were cool, I would sing it in like a Massachusetts accent. And I don't know what that would be. But I could do a Boston one. Ladies who lore. Love you all. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe out there.